The roar was deafening, a monstrous voice tearing through the night. Catherine pressed her back against the door, her arms trembling as she tried to hold it shut. The wind rattled every window, like fists pounding on glass. Her heart raced faster than the storm itself, and her breath came in short bursts. She whispered prayers into the chaos, as if words could calm the rage outside. The walls groaned, bending under invisible hands of fury. Every creak sounded like a warning that the house might collapse at any moment. A photograph fell from the wall, shattering against the floor. Catherine's eyes caught it for a second, the smiling faces of her family frozen in time. But the storm didn't care about memories. It wanted everything. A violent crash shook the entire house as the roof gave way in parts. Rain poured in, drenching her hair, her skin, her soul. The air smelled of salt and destruction, as though the ocean itself had risen to swallow her. Lightning split the darkness, revealing terror in sharp flashes. Catherine knew she couldn't stay inside any longer. She stumbled toward the back door, clutching a flashlight. Her bare feet slipped on the wet floor as water seeped in. The sound of wood snapping was everywhere, sharp, final. The night outside was worse, flying debris, pieces of roofs and trees twisting like broken toys. Every step was a battle between survival and panic. Her dog barked desperately, lost somewhere in the darkness of the yard. Catherine screamed his name, but the wind devoured her voice. Fear clawed at her chest, but she refused to leave him behind. She fought through the gale, her flashlight beam cutting only a thin slice of madness. She finally caught sight of him, trembling, trapped under a fallen branch. With trembling hands, she freed the dog, pulling him against her chest. His fur was soaked, but his heart beat wildly against her arms. Together, they staggered back into the ruins of the house, seeking any corner still standing. The world outside was merciless, but at least they were not alone. Together, they clung to life. Hours stretched like eternity. The storm refused to end, screaming louder, pushing harder. Catherine closed her eyes, holding her dog, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Then, suddenly, the sound began to fade. It didn't end with relief, it ended with silence. And that silence was even more terrifying. The morning light revealed devastation Catherine could hardly comprehend. Where her home once stood proudly, now only broken wood and shattered glass remained. The air smelled of wet earth and gasoline, mixed with the smoke of distant fires. Every step across the debris crunched like bones underfoot. It was no longer her neighborhood, but a graveyard of lives. She moved slowly, scanning for fragments of her past. A ceramic mug cracked in half. A quilt her grandmother had sewn, now soaked and torn. The simplest objects carried entire lifetimes inside them. Her chest tightened with every discovery, not because of the things themselves, but because they reminded her of moments now gone forever. Neighbors wandered aimlessly, faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Some cried silently, others shouted names, hoping for answers. Catherine recognized no sound more painful than the absence of familiar voices. The community she had known for years looked unrecognizable, as if erased overnight. She hugged her dog tighter, feeling small against the emptiness. In the distance, emergency sirens wailed, cutting through the stillness. Trucks and volunteers began arriving, their bright jackets like specks of hope. Catherine's body ached, but her spirit was heavier. She wanted to run, to escape the sight of all she had lost, yet her feet rooted to the soil of her broken home, unwilling to let go. She sat on a fallen beam, staring at the ruins, and felt anger rise inside her. Anger at the storm, at fate, at herself for not being able to stop any of it. Tears blurred her vision until the wreckage became nothing but colors. It wasn't just her house, it was her history, her laughter, her sense of safety. All of it swept away. Her dog nuzzled her side, breaking through the fog of despair. His warmth reminded her of something vital. They were still alive. She realized survival itself was an act of defiance. As she looked at other survivors gathering together, Catherine understood she couldn't stay there, frozen in grief. She needed to move forward. With one last look at the ruins, she whispered goodbye. She turned away, her legs weak but determined. Somewhere, there had to be shelter, a place to breathe and begin again. She didn't know where she was heading, but she knew she had no choice. The storm had stolen her past, but it had not taken her will. The shelter was a school gymnasium, its walls lined with cots and blankets. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, mixed with the sweat of exhaustion. Families sat huddled together, clutching bags of whatever they managed to save. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional sob or the muffled voice of volunteers. It wasn't home, but it was safety. Catherine walked in with her dog close by, unsure if they would even be allowed inside. A volunteer smiled softly and handed her a blanket, nodding toward an empty cot. For the first time in hours, her shoulders eased slightly. The cot was small, the blanket thin, but it was enough to remind her she wasn't abandoned. Around her, faces told stories without words. A child clutched a teddy bear with one ear missing. An elderly man held a Bible so tightly his knuckles turned white. A young woman rocked a baby, her eyes red but steady. Catherine felt her grief reflected in theirs, and for a moment, she didn't feel as alone. She lay down, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady hum of voices and footsteps. The shelter was full of strangers, yet they shared a bond deeper than families. Catherine wrapped the blanket tighter around her, her dog curling against her feet. It wasn't comfort, but it was warmth. As the night stretched on, memories returned uninvited. The sound of the storm, the image of her house crumbling, the helplessness that filled her. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block it out, but the echoes of destruction followed her into sleep, twisting her dreams into restless shadows. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the high windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the reality of the cot, the noise, the smell brought everything back. She sat up, the weight of despair pressing against her again. But then she noticed someone watching her. A woman with gentle eyes. The woman smiled faintly and offered Catherine a cup of water. Catherine hesitated, then accepted. Their hands touched briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. It was more than kindness, it was recognition. In that moment, Catherine realized her story wasn't hers alone. Others carried the same wounds, and together, maybe they could begin to heal. The woman's name was Marjorie, a neighbor Catherine had seen in passing but never truly known. Now, in the dim light of the shelter, they were bound by loss. Marjorie's home had been destroyed too, along with the memories of her late husband. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her eyes held a quiet strength. Catherine listened closely, comforted by the shared grief. For hours, they exchanged stories. They spoke of the storm, of their families, of the simple joys they once took for granted. Tears fell freely, but so did small bursts of laughter, surprising them both. It felt strange to laugh amid so much sorrow, but perhaps it was laughter itself that reminded them they were still alive. Catherine found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She confessed her fear of never rebuilding, her guilt for feeling weak, her longing for the home she had lost. Marjorie nodded, not with pity, but with understanding. "We've both lost our houses," she said softly, "but we haven't lost our ability to start again." Those words clung to Catherine's heart long after they stopped talking. They became a quiet mantra in her mind, something to hold on to when the despair grew louder. She realized that Marjorie was more than a fellow survivor. She was a mirror reflecting Catherine's own resilience. Together, they carried a strength neither had felt alone. The next morning, Catherine and Marjorie decided to return to their neighborhood. The idea terrified Catherine, but the thought of facing it alone was worse. As they left the shelter, the air was heavy with humidity, and the sky wore a gray veil. Their steps were slow, hesitant, as if walking back into a nightmare. When they arrived, the ruins looked even more merciless in daylight. Catherine's chest tightened, but Marjorie placed a hand on her arm. That simple gesture gave her courage to move forward. She stepped across the broken pieces of her old life, each fragment whispering memories of laughter, birthdays, and quiet evenings, together. They walked in silence, the weight of loss pressing down but shared between them. And then, amid the debris, Catherine spotted something half buried beneath splintered wood. She knelt, heart pounding, and pulled it free. It was small, fragile, but it carried a lifetime within it. For the first time since the storm, her tears carried not just grief but something else. In her hands, Catherine held a porcelain music box, cracked but intact enough to play a faint tune. It had belonged to her mother, a piece of childhood she thought lost forever. The melody was weak, tinny, but it filled the air with a haunting sweetness. She pressed it to her chest, and for the first time since the storm, she allowed herself to weep fully. Marjorie stood beside her, silent but steady. She understood the weight of the object without Catherine needing to explain. Memories surged like waves: her mother's laughter, Christmas mornings, quiet nights when the music box lulled her to sleep. For a moment, the wreckage around her disappeared, replaced by the warmth of a home long gone. But the joy of finding it quickly twisted into pain. Holding the music box reminded her not of what she had, but of everything she had lost. She wanted to smash it against the ground, to silence the memories forever. Instead, she clutched it tighter, torn between gratitude and anguish. Her heart battled itself with every note. The wind rustled through broken trees, carrying the smell of damp wood and ashes. Catherine wiped her tears, her hands trembling, as she closed the music box. It was fragile, like her, but it had survived. Perhaps survival itself was its message, that even broken things still had value. She placed it gently into her bag, deciding it would travel with her. Marjorie pointed to her own ruins, where she had found nothing but emptiness. Catherine saw the despair in her friend's eyes, and for the first time, she spoke words of comfort instead of silence. "We'll rebuild," she whispered, her voice unsteady but firm. Saying it aloud made the possibility feel real, even if only faintly. Together, they sat on the edge of Catherine's property, surrounded by debris and silence. The storm had taken almost everything, yet it had left behind something unexpected: connection. Two women, who were strangers before, now carried each other's burdens. That, Catherine thought, might be the foundation of something new. As they prepared to leave, Catherine glanced back at the ruins one last time. The pain was sharp, but no longer paralyzing. In her bag, the music box rested like a fragile heartbeat, reminding her of both loss and endurance. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she would not face it alone. Paperwork piled like driftwood on a shore that never ended. Catherine sat at a folding table, tracing forms with numb fingers: insurance numbers, claim IDs, case notes written in tiny script. Every box she checked felt like lifting a fallen beam alone. Hope flickered, but the maze of steps dimmed the light. A volunteer named Aaron approached with a calm presence. He didn't promise miracles. He offered clarity and pace. "One page at a time," he said, sliding a pen toward her hand. His steadiness slowed the panic racing through her chest. Breath by breath, the ocean of tasks shrank to ripples. They called the hotline together, listening to robotic voices. Hold music hummed in the background like distant machinery. When the call dropped, Catherine clenched her jaw, then released. Aaron smiled, redialed, and made a neat list of next steps. The process would not save her, but it would move her forward. Outside, the afternoon heat pressed down on the parking lot. Humidity wrapped around her like a heavy, invisible coat. She watched families loading water into the trunks of cars. No one moved quickly, yet everyone kept moving anyway. It looked like grief, learning the rhythm of endurance. Catherine thought of the music box wrapped inside her bag, fragile, cracked, still willing to sing when asked. She decided to become that kind of instrument today. Not loud, not perfect, but persistent and true. She straightened her shoulders and took the next form. By dusk, she had a folder labeled with her name. Inside were dates, contacts, and copies of each document. It was small, almost laughably simple against such ruin, but it felt like a foundation stone placed with care. Progress does not roar. Sometimes it whispers and stays. As she left the table, Aaron tapped the folder gently. "Tomorrow, kitchens need hands," he said with a nod. "Hot meals give people a reason to stand longer." Catherine met his eyes and found a yes inside hers. She walked away tired, but tethered to a direction. The kitchen buzzed like a hive at first light. Steam lifted from giant pots, carrying the scent of garlic. Metal ladles clanged, timers chirped, voices overlapped kindly. Catherine tied an apron and washed her hands twice. Action moved faster than doubt, and she followed it. She chopped onions, tears coming for practical reasons. The sting felt honest, a sorrow with purpose attached. Beside her, a teenager stirred rice with careful focus. They exchanged shy smiles, companions in quiet service. The room's warmth settled into her bones, slow and real. Orders rolled in on sticky notes taped to trays. 3 for the North Block, 2 for the church lot. Someone cracked a joke. Someone else answered in kind. The laughter rose like steam and drifted to the rafters. Catherine felt herself breathe all the way down. When the rush eased, she carried meals to a table. A woman thanked her and touched her wrist gently. For a heartbeat, Catherine felt the pulse of community. These weren't customers. They were anchors holding together. Gratitude tasted like soup, simple, hot, and restorative. Aaron appeared, sleeves rolled, hair damp with effort. He asked how the kitchen felt in her hands today. "Like a place that turns chaos into nourishment," she said. He nodded, eyes bright with a hope that included her. "Would you be open to something a little bigger?" Her stomach fluttered, as if a bird had stirred awake. Bigger meant risk. Bigger meant the possibility of failing. But bigger also meant meaning, and she missed that fiercely. "Tell me what it is," she said, steady but curious. Aaron glanced at the whiteboard, then back at her. "We're forming block teams to rebuild critical homes. Not all at once. Just one roof, one ramp, one room. We need someone to coordinate volunteers on your street." Catherine looked at her hands, onion-scented and warm. She lifted her gaze and said, "Teach me, let's start." The morning meeting circled around a hand-drawn map, streets sketched in marker, stars where help was urgent. Catherine listened, taking notes in a tidy grid. Each star was a story breathing between the lines. She felt the map throb like a living heart. Their first sight was a house with a shattered porch. An elderly veteran waited on the steps, cane in hand. He smiled as the crew unloaded lumber and tools. "Didn't think I'd see this porch again," he murmured. Catherine answered, "We'll get you a doorway of dignity." She assigned tasks the way the kitchen served plates. Clear rolls, clear timing, constant refills of water. The rhythm emerged. Measure, cut, drill, breathe, repeat. Sawdust floated in sunlight like quiet confetti. Progress wrote its name across each new plank. At noon, she called a pause and passed sandwiches. Sweat traced lines on forearms, mixing with laughter. The veteran told a story about his first dance. He pointed to where the radio once sat by the railing. Catherine pictured music filling the rebuilt air. A miscut board threatened to stall the momentum. Voices rose, frustration flashing like quick lightning. Catherine stepped in, voice low but sure. "We fixed the board, not each other," she said. The tension exhaled, and hands returned to work. By evening, the porch stood level and strong. The veteran tested each step with careful pride. He turned, eyes wet, and saluted the crew softly. No speeches, no fanfare, just a long, grateful nod. Catherine felt the day settle like a blessing. As they packed up, Aaron walked beside her. "You delegate well when the wind picks up," he said. She smiled, surprised by the solidity in her spine. "Maybe the storm taught me to brace and guide." Tomorrow's map already glowed in her pocket. The following week, the whiteboard filled faster than coffee cups. Requests multiplied, and with them, the weight of decisions. Whose roof first? Which ramp? Which window? Which wall? Catherine felt the math of mercy tug at her. Need was infinite. Their hours were not. A regional nonprofit sent two coordinators to observe. They watched Catherine split teams and close gaps. They saw her calm, afraid argument with few words. Afterward, they asked to speak outside near the vans. The evening sky blushed pink behind the scaffolding. "We're launching a neighborhood pilot," one explained gently. "Local leadership, volunteer training, microgrants for supplies. We believe you're the right person to lead this hub." The title sounded heavier than a stack of wet shingles. Catherine swallowed, hearing her heartbeat in her ears. She thought of the music box, of her mother's song, of Marjorie's steady presence in the shelter's glow, of the veteran's salute and the kitchen's warmth. Leadership was not a crown, it was a compass. Could she hold true north when storms returned? "What if I make the wrong call?" she asked honestly. "What if someone waits too long because of me?" The coordinator nodded, acknowledging the honest fear. "Then we learn fast and adjust together," he said. "Grace is part of the building code here." Catherine looked toward the block they'd rebuilt. Fresh lumber, new railings, windows breathing light. She imagined multiplying that steadiness across the grid. "Okay," she said, voice quiet, decision firming. "Teach me the paperwork. I'll steward the people." They shook hands, no trumpets, just dust and dusk. Aaron grinned, relief and pride bright in his face. Marjorie squeezed Catherine's shoulder from behind. "You were already doing it," she whispered warmly. The map in her pocket became a promise kept. Training began before sunrise. With coffee and checklists, Catherine learned inventory like a second language. Tar paper, joist hangers, flashing PPE, spare blades. She paired each item with a name and task. Supplies became stories waiting for the right hands. She introduced morning circles with 3 simple cues. State your name, your role, and one small win. Victories surfaced. Found my cat, slept 6 hours, roof sealed. The air brightened as gratitude threaded through fatigue. Teams dispersed carrying more than tools, they carried courage. Midweek, a delivery truck arrived short on materials. Schedules teetered, and worry rippled across the lot. Catherine resequenced tasks like a conductor porches today, roofing tomorrow, drywall on Saturday. The rhythm held because the music kept playing. She walked sites with a notebook and listening first. A widow wanted her garden fence rebuilt for safety. A teacher needed a back door that actually locked. A barber asked for power restored to his clippers. Each request braided dignity back into daily life. Exhaustion stalked the crew by late afternoon. Catherine called for stretch breaks and cold oranges. Sticky fingers and laughter returned energy to shoulders. Small mercies became scaffolding for the spirit. The sun slid lower, forgiving the heat at last. At a final sight, a girl traced fresh studs. Curious, will this wall keep the wind out next time? She asked. Catherine knelt, meeting her eyes with steady warmth. It will, and so will the people behind it, she said. The girl smiled, a soft light settling in place. That night, Catherine stood before the map alone. Pins marked progress, notes marked needs and names. She touched the star over her own ruined lot gently. Home was no longer a question but a direction. She turned off the light, carrying tomorrow's spark. The recovery crews sifted through rubble daily now. One evening, a volunteer carried over a weathered box. Found this near your lot, he said with a smile. Catherine opened it, breath catching at the contents inside. Photographs, yellowed but intact, stared back like ghosts. Her wedding day, her daughter's first birthday, Christmas mornings, faces framed in light and laughter, frozen in glossy squares. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she traced each one. She hadn't realized how much she missed seeing smiles. The past, once shattered, sat whole in her lap again. But joy mingled with grief, sharp as broken glass. The photos whispered of rooms that no longer existed. Walls, furniture, and scents now lived only in memory. For a moment, the ache nearly drowned her breath. She closed the lid, grounding herself in the present. Marjorie noticed her silence and squeezed her shoulder. Memories weigh less when carried together, she said gently. Catherine inhaled, letting her friend's words take root. She wasn't alone in carrying loss or love. That truth softened the heaviness resting in her chest. That night, Catherine spread the photos on her cot. She invited neighbors to share stories of their own. The shelter transformed into a circle of remembrance. Grief turned into storytelling. Sorrow into connection. The air warmed with shared humanity, stitched in words. Later, Catherine tucked the photos back in the box, but instead of hiding them, she placed it nearby. They were not relics to bury, but seeds to cherish. Every smile reminded her that life had been full, and it could be full again, even if different. The box rested beside the music box now. Two survivors of the storm, fragile yet enduring. Catherine understood their meaning with new clarity. The storm destroyed walls but not memory or love. Those treasures would guide her through the next steps. Clouds gathered heavy and dark weeks later. Whispers spread through the shelter and work sites. A new storm, smaller but menacing, approached the coast. Catherine's chest tightened as the wind picked up. Every sound echoed the night her world collapsed. She paced the gymnasium floor as families prepared. Children clung to blankets, parents whispered reassurances. Catherine's own dog barked, sensing her unease. She wanted to flee, to vanish from the fear. But dozens of eyes turned toward her instinctively. Aaron handed her a megaphone, steady and calm. You know what to do, he told her firmly. Her hands shook, but she lifted it anyway. Check your supplies, stay close, stay safe, she said. Her voice surprised her, firm, clear, commanding. Lightning cracked outside, rattling the windows. The gym darkened as power flickered and failed. Cries rose, panic creeping through the crowd. Catherine lit lanterns, directing volunteers into action. The chaos shrank under her steady instructions. Hours passed in a blur of vigilance. She moved from cat to cat, offering calm words. Children fell asleep despite the storm outside. Mothers and fathers breathed easier under her watch. Leadership became her shield against fears, sharp-edged by dawn. The storm had veered northward. Rain still tapped the roof, but danger had passed. The shelter sighed as one collective breath released. Neighbors embraced, some weeping, some laughing aloud. Catherine sank onto a bench, exhaustion overwhelming. Aaron sat beside her, handing her coffee. You turned fear into order last night, he said. She smiled weakly, sipping the bitter warmth. I only did what had to be done, she replied. But inside, she knew something had changed forever. Reconstruction continued, steadier now with systems in place. Catherine walked her block, noting progress with quiet pride. Roofs sealed, windows replaced, porches freshly painted white. The sound of hammers mixed with children's laughter again. The neighborhood was finding its heartbeat back. Still, her lot remained empty. marked only by debris. Every day she paused there, touching the soil gently. Part of her feared starting over on that ground, but another part longed to plant something new, a decision pressed, insistent, waiting for her yes. One morning, she met with a builder volunteer. He spread blueprints on a folding table. "We can design something simple but strong," he said. Catherine traced the lines with cautious fingers. Each wall drawn felt like a whispered promise. Marjorie joined her, nodding with encouragement. "You deserve to live, not just survive," she urged. The words cracked Catherine's resistance wide open. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's build it here again." That afternoon, she planted flowers by the lot, small blooms of color against gray wreckage. Neighbors paused, smiling at the sight of them. It wasn't a house yet, but it was hope. The ground itself seemed to sigh with relief. Catherine visited the site daily after that. She cleaned debris, marked corners, and imagined rooms. Her heart beat steadier with each vision. The lot transformed from ruin into foundation. She belonged to this soil, and it to her. Evenings, she sat by the flowers with her dog. The sunset painted the sky in forgiving hues. Her past still hurt, but the present had roots. She whispered to the earth, "We're home again." The wind carried her words like a blessing. Months later, the block buzzed with energy. New houses stood, bright paint gleaming in sunlight. Children raced bicycles past rebuilt porches. Neighbors hung flags and strings of lights. The community prepared for its first celebration. Catherine stood by a long table of food. Baked casseroles, pies, and steaming pots lined it. She laughed as Aaron teased her about cooking. Marjorie arrived carrying lemonade and a wide grin. Joy felt strange but welcome, like sunlight after rain. The mayor gave a short speech of gratitude, but it was Catherine who drew the loudest applause. "Your strengths showed us how to stand again," he said. She blushed, shaking her head in protest. "I just refused to give up," she answered simply. Music began, guitars strumming hopeful melodies. People danced, swaying beneath string lights. Laughter rippled through the warm evening air. Catherine tapped her foot, smiling at the scene. Life was singing again in this street of survivors. Children pulled her into a circle of dance. Her dog barked, chasing after their spinning feet. She twirled, dizzy with joy and disbelief. Months ago, she thought joy was gone forever. Now it flowed like water through her veins. The veteran with the rebuilt porch approached. He saluted again, this time in celebration. Catherine hugged him tightly, no words needed. The crowd clapped, sharing the moment warmly. Healing was no longer private but collective. As lanterns lit the night sky above them, Catherine felt tears brim. But these were new, not of loss, but of gratitude overflowing. The storm had broken them, but not destroyed them. Together, they had written a second beginning. The day Catherine's house was ready felt surreal. Fresh wood, clean paint, a door she could lock. The scent of sawdust mixed with crisp morning air. Neighbors gathered quietly, offering hugs and cheers. She stood before the threshold, heart pounding fast. Her dog bounded through the doorway first. Catherine followed, her steps slow but steady. Inside, sunlight spilled across empty rooms. Bare walls echoed with possibility, not silence. It wasn't what she lost, it was what she gained. She touched the frame of the front window gently, imagining curtains swaying, plants resting on sills. She pictured laughter echoing again through these halls, not copies of the old life, but new ones, memories waiting to be written, not mourned. On a small table, she placed two items, the cracked music box and the box of photos. They belonged here, survivors of storm and time, symbols of fragility, endurance, and continuity. Her heart swelled as the tune faintly played. Marjorie entered, holding lemonade in 2 glasses. "Two new beginnings," she said, raising hers high. Catherine clinked the glass with trembling fingers. The drink tasted like sweetness after salt. They laughed, their voices filling the empty home. That night, Catherine lay in her new bedroom. The air carried the faint scent of paint. She listened, not for storms but for silence. This silence felt different, safe, steady, kind. Her dog curled at her side, content and warm. Before closing her eyes, Catherine whispered aloud, "The storm took my house but gave me purpose." Her words settled into the fresh walls like prayer. Life would never be the same, but it was alive, and that was more than enough.